Hello, I'm Claire Wormsley, the co-founder of the Global Conference Network, and we're here today with Orson Francescone, as he is the inaugural winner of our monthly virtual event awards with the Global Boardroom. I've known Orson quite some time now, originally from Euromonic Institutional Investor, where he held senior positions, and then with DMG, Haymarket, and in November 2019, he joined FT Live as their managing director. Not a huge amount of time to get your feet under the table, learn the systems and your team, and know more about your brand, Orson, before COVID struck. And I just wanted to rewind a little bit before we talked about your entry, because you managed to put together the global economic emergency in 4 days as a virtual event. How did you manage to do that?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching us from in the world. First of all, thank you so much, Claire, for asking me to join you today. And it's been unbelievably exciting to be the first award winners of the digital awards. So when I'm trying to rewind the clock, because as we all, I'm sure we feel, last year was a bit of a blur. But back in March, I think, when the first lockdown started coming in, or the first indications that business wasn't going to be normal, like all event organizers, we were faced with well, what are we going to do now? And the immediate answer is, well, there's not much we can do, and probably a whole year's wiped out. Now, in those days, if you remember, Claire, I think there was an expectation that by the autumn things would be better, and so while it felt very serious, we kind of felt that, well, maybe in not so long we'll be back to normal. And of course, that wasn't to be the case. But in any case, I felt, well, we're not just going to sit on our hands for the next 3 or 4 months. And so what is it that we can do? Well, the only thing we can do is run a webinar. And so we ran something very simple, Claire, which is a webinar, and as you know, webinars have existed for many, many years. But we'd never had to use webinars because, or apart from in a very, very rare circumstances, to do a bit of content marketing. But us event organizers, we're focused on physical events and growing our physical assets. And the last thing we were worrying about were webinars. So suddenly the old webinar came out of the box again. And so I said, well, listen, we might as well run some piece of content. And so the big question on everyone's mind was, well, what does this lockdown mean for the economy, right? And obviously the FT and its amazing journalists are very well placed to discuss that. And so all it was actually was, let's just do a webinar on the economic emergency. And to be honest, I didn't think much of it, and I wasn't expecting much of it. And we had Martin Wolf, who's our chief economic commentator, and maybe one other person. And so we decided to put it out quite quickly in about 4 days, but it was just a 20-minute webinar. So, in fairness, it didn't need much work. So we sent out maybe 2 marketing emails. And I guess what we were surprised by was the numbers. I think we got about maybe 4, 5, 6,000 people now, which I thought, gosh, that's, I was expecting in the hundreds. I don't know why, I hadn't run a webinar for years, and I was like, well, we'll just put it out there and see what happens. And suddenly we got this rush of registrations. And so anyway, we delivered the webinar, which was quite easy from a delivery point of view. But certainly the numbers really struck us. And then John Ridding, who's our CEO, called me after the webinar, and he said, well, listen, that was great, and the numbers are incredible. Can we do something bigger and better? And so I said, yeah, of course. And being relatively new, you don't say no to the CEO. And that really was the impetus for what then became the Global Boardroom. And so we then thought, well, there's clearly something in this, because I might be getting the numbers right. It might have been 8,000, but it was big numbers. And that was the thing that really we weren't expecting. And so we just said, well, can we put a full day conference together? And over a weekend, I guess myself and some other members of the team essentially wrote the conference program for the Global Boardroom, which turned out to be a 3-day event with about 100 and more speakers. And I guess the big driving factor for me, Claire, was speed. And I kind of, throughout this whole crisis, speed as a strategic advantage was very much what was going through my mind. And I knew we wanted to move quickly. We needed to move quickly. I don't know why, actually. It was more of an instinct thing, to be honest. I think being new in the job, the feeling was, I'm not going to let this crisis, like, you know, fold my business, having just joined. And so it was very much a survival instinct kind of mode. And for whatever reason, we just decided we wanted to go quickly. We want to be the first ones out. I think we felt like, well, if we don't move quickly, our competitors are going to launch a load of things, really. It then turned out that actually it took most people quite a bit of time to get their head around the digital event proposition. But we, on that weekend, I told John, our CEO, I said, listen, we're going to do it, and we're going to do it on this date, which was, I think, 4.5 weeks from that date. And so once I'd set that line in the sand with my CEO, you know, I was kind of immovable, really, because he's like, well, that sounds great, and let's just get on with it. And then, of course, I immediately regretted having set that date, because once I started getting into the whole digital event production landscape, I realized, crikey, this is a lot more complicated than I could ever possibly imagine. I think I had visions of, well, if we can do a 20-minute webinar, let's just, you know, replicate that and make it longer. But obviously, as you know, and as most of people watching will know now, that a digital conference proposition is actually quite a complex piece of work. And so
you used a real range of technology. I mean, I'm going through the list: Visbo, Slido, Zoom, Whitecove. I mean, name a few. I mean, how did you go about selecting the technology, and how did you integrate it all?
Yeah, good question. So on the Global Boardroom, to be honest, we didn't have time to do much scoping of what was out there. And so, as most of you watching will know, you will have your own registration system, payment systems, and essentially it was a stitch it together kind of job, right? So you need to stitch your registration system with your payment system, with a digital broadcasting system, with something that allows people to have some interactivity, which in this case was Slido. Then you have to build a website. You need to integrate it into your own website. And so, as I said, very quickly I realized, crikey, this is a lot more complicated than I ever thought. And so in a way, there wasn't much thought about selecting the best providers. We kind of used what we knew we had and people we had relationships with from a technology procurement point of view, and we kind of sellotaped it all together, I guess, is one way of putting it. But it turned out well on the day. But I mean, frankly, I mean, I had many sleepless nights throughout those 4 weeks, and on the day of the event, you know, you can imagine the palpitations, and I was getting calls from John saying, you know, I hope you know what you're doing, and I hope the tech is going to be solid, and I hope everything is going to be fine. And so touch wood, all the planets aligned, and, you know, apart from a couple of, you know, small things, actually it went very well.
And were your team, I mean, how were your team? Because I mean, I think like most of us, we didn't have the skills, and it's been quite exciting to develop and actually learn new things.
Yeah.
But I mean, that's a big event to put on with people who didn't necessarily have the skills to do so.
Yeah, good question. And then what I might touch upon what we did afterwards, because then we spent the whole summer doing a proper review of technology that is out there, and we slightly changed our tech stack. But in terms of the Global Boardroom, you know, we used an external. Essentially, I knew that this was akin to running a TV show, and so I think I remember Googling freelance TV production companies, and I called a few of them, and I landed on one of them that I thought sounded like they could help us. We then ended up establishing a very good, strong relationship with them, and we probably couldn't. Well, I know we couldn't have done it without them, right? Because what then turned out to be complicated was not just the tech stack, but also you wanted it to look and feel good, and people have television level standards and expectations, right? And suddenly, you know, we're small conference people, and by small I mean, you know, small business, or, you know, we don't have the budgets of the BBC or ITV, right? And so, but in terms of what people expect is more or less that kind of level, right? So we're in an era where everyone watches Netflix and everyone watches, you know, BritBox or whatever it is that you're signed on, and delivering something that isn't close to that sort of level of quality would jar very quickly with people, right? Because that's what we're used to watching every day. And so again, the other big kind of, you know, stomach churning moment was like, crikey, this is television territory, and we're not television people, right? And so anyway, we partnered with an external provider, which was great, and we ended up delivering the huge numbers. I think it was 55,000 registrations in the first Global Boardroom. Again, you know, on the vein of that webinar that we ran. and I guess the rest is history. And it was
Did you
unbelievably
forecast
successful.
those numbers? Did you
No.
have any idea that you were going to get that level of interest?
No, genuinely no idea. I mean, we knew, I think we'd got 7,000 on that webinar, so we'd like to think that we were going to get more than that. I think, just trying to think back, I think at some stage when I got asked the question, what are we going to get? I think I said, between 15,000 and 20, I'd be happy with, given we'd got 7,000 on the webinar. And then we ended up with 55,000. And bear in mind that half of those, so about over 20,000 people registered in the 24 hours before the event and during the event, right? So that was completely unexpected. We went in on day one with about 20,000 registrations, and we came out on day three with 55,000 registrations. So again, these are all kind of numbers and behaviors that blew our minds, right? That we're just not used to in our B2B conference world. And so, yeah, that's the story of the Global Boardroom, I guess. And also we were able to secure what I would say quite a significant amount of sponsorship in the course of 4 weeks. And bear in mind, those 4 weeks, this was April, and in April, all marketing budgets were locked down. I mean, everyone was like, forget it. I mean, what, you're calling from an events company, they just hang the phone up, right? And so we were able to unlock quite a lot of sponsorship in quite a short amount of time in a very challenged period where everyone's like, listen, this sounds great, but we've never done it before. Have you ever done it before? No. Suddenly you're asking us for a lot of money. And anyway, I mean, listen, thanks to the
Your sales team, I mean, how did they obviously did a great job, but I mean, that's quite a shift in their sales proposition, selling something which hadn't been done before.
Yeah, good question. So listen, the power of the brand obviously carried us a lot, right? What we did do very quickly after the global, so once the Global Boardroom happened, we knew that we had something that we could then run with, right? So suddenly the mindset was very much, well, we're in survival mindset, and if we can do a few webinars or a few events here and there, it'll keep us bumbling along until things go back to normal. And then that event really, shifted my mindset into, well, this is an opportunity rather than a survival instinct, right? And so suddenly then all the thought process and systems kind of kicked in place, as in, I want to capitalize on this opportunity as quickly as possible. And so one of the things that I knew, I come from a content production background, but I've done my fair share of sponsorship sales back in the years, and managed sponsorship sales teams. And as you will know, sales teams are very practical in the sense of when they're trying to sell sponsorship packages to their customers, they want to know exactly what they're selling. So, how big is the room? How big is the logo? At what time am I going to speak? And is it going to be champagne or Prosecco, right? Very quickly, salespeople get into that kind of, well, some salespeople, need features to get their sales over the line, right? And so I knew that immediately the sales team would be like, well, what am I selling? And it's like, and digital event isn't enough of a good answer. And so we ended up putting in place some pretty swanky digital brochures and also demos. And so I kind of said to the team, we need to approach this a bit of like a software sales, right? So like a SaaS sales model. And so in a SaaS sales model, you would schedule a call with your client and you would talk them through a demo, right? You would show them, this piece of software, take Salesforce. This is what it can do, and let me show you how it can integrate into your daily workflow. And so very quickly, I got the sales team to start thinking like a SaaS sales team. And we spent quite a bit of money producing a very nice kind of what I would say demo kind of video and training them in the demo of the event platform that we eventually settled on. And so I wanted the sales team to become experts on the platform in order to reassure those marketing people in the blue chip companies who are also focused on, well, where does my logo go, and where do I go, what do I press to get into the room, and where's my stand? And so I knew very quickly that all these questions would come flooding in. And so that's kind of how we set ourselves up with a bit of a SaaS sales mentality.
Impressive, because that's a big shift for your sales team, but also for your clients as well, to kind of buy into this concept which hadn't been done.
Correct. And I knew that unless our presentation or our demo was unbelievably slick, they would start to lose confidence. They'd be like, well, I'm not sure about this. This doesn't look great. Or unless we were able to answer even quite detailed questions about the technology, I know that people would start losing faith, because they'd be like, well, you guys don't sound like you know what you're doing, right? And so We very much equipped ourselves to be a SaaS sales team and to be able to answer all sorts of quite detailed questions that we knew were going to be thrown at us by those marketing teams, right?
One of the numbers which I was really impressed with, which I'm sure your CEO was delighted with, was your global reach and the impact it's had on your subscriber base. Yeah. And I think I've been talking to quite a few media companies about their shift to the sort of community model. And obviously with your subscribers, you're kind of one step ahead of that. But I mean, those numbers were really, you know, pretty phenomenal.
Yeah. Really exciting because, by the way, as you know, and we and include you, we come from a paid content kind of background, right? Mm-hmm. And so, we were brought up in the paid conference model where, I remember back in the days, free tickets were just completely banned and not even to be asked or questioned, right? And so very quickly during that weekend at the Global Boardroom, I had to make the decision whether we were going to charge or not. And to be honest, it kind of went against everything I believed in and my grain to go down the free model. But I just thought, listen, we've got 4.5 weeks to do this. It's just not going to happen if we charge people. And, we either have to make a very quick decision on this. Are we going to go down the sponsorship route or the delegate revenue route? And so I decided, and I was very conflicted making that decision, but ultimately it was the right decision to go down the free to attend and sponsorship route. And so when we deliver those 55,000 people, well, that is a huge, and by the way, I think about 60 or 70% of those names were completely new to the FT. So suddenly you're bringing in a huge amount of new data into an organization which primarily builds its business on selling subscriptions. And I can tell you our subscription division was very, 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 very happy, right? Because suddenly you got these, warmish, warm, I wouldn't say hot, but certainly, warm leads coming into the business that can be converted into subscribers. And so that's one of the other big advantages of the digital model is, as we know, we're bringing in a lot bigger numbers. So I'll give you a statistic, but in 2019, FT Live, so this is before coronavirus, had about 25,000 paid registered delegates at their physical events around the world. And last year we ended up with 250,000 registered delegates at our events, right? And so that's pretty mind-blowing, right? Now, vast majority free, not paying, so your business model is very different. But just in terms of scale, that's quite mind-blowing, isn't it?
It is. On the business model, do you think you're going to stay as a sponsor-led proposition? Or do you see developing, I know you've got some sort of packages where delegates get access to different products. Do you see that developing or do you see it staying pretty much like the original one?
Good question. So when we ran the second version of the Global Boardroom in October, we introduced I guess what I call a freemium model. So there's still an opportunity to watch the show free online, but we introduced paid tickets. So for example, if you wanted to watch it on a video on demand, then you had to buy the paid ticket. And then we introduced some end of day PDF reports that would give people summaries of the proceedings. And so, and then a networking ticket. And, I'll be honest, the paid numbers weren't huge. I mean, they're relatively significant. We're probably talking, I don't know, over 40 or 50,000 pounds of paid tickets. But, given the scale of the event, a relatively small percentage compared to the sponsorship. And so I think we will continue down that route. And so we know that there is, we don't want to gate the global audiences, right? And a lot of the sponsors like the big numbers, but they are becoming more discerning. And so, yes, big numbers are good, but they have to be the right type of people, which is kind of what we always know, even from the physical kind of world, right? And so I think we will keep experimenting with that model, Claire. So we definitely think there is some value in charging for some features. And so we don't want to leave that on the table. And then, of course, the big question is, once physical events come back, how does your model change? But, I think, everyone agrees that charging £1,500 or £2,000 for a digital event just is not going to happen, right? And so once you've settled that in your mind, and again, for people like us who come from a paid background, it's quite a difficult thing to settle with, because we're like, what, we've charged for forever. But let's not forget, we've also yanked millions of costs out of our P&L, right? And so, I don't think we can always have it both ways.
Yeah.
And so the digital business model is sustainable because our cost base is lower because we're not paying big venues.
What about though when things do get back to physical live events? Do you have a view as to how hybrid's going to work for FT Live?
Yeah. Again, we're working on this right now, really, and it's actually harder than we thought. We're having many meetings about what is this going to look like, and we need to be prepared when things are right as to how they're going to look. And the model we're going down is having 3 or 4 different templates, because first of all, every event is different, and we run a wide variety of events and topics and sectors, and some are more networking focused and some are more thought leadership content focused, I guess. And so we don't want to confine ourselves to a particular model. And so I think we're starting from what are the known variables? Well, the known variables is that even when we do go back to physical, it'll start relatively slowly. It'll be localized rather than international. And it'll probably be either social distance or smallish in nature to start with. And so we're beginning to think around, what does that mean? Does it mean we run our digital event and maybe there's a drinks reception at the end of the day in physical format? So some people in London, New York can meet in physical format if they want. Does it mean that we start running small roundtables in a physical format while either on the side or before or after the digital event? And so I think I'm beginning not to use the word hybrid, more of an integrated model will evolve. And so it'll probably start small and localized and more like a VIP access model, while we still run the digital content online. And as and when preferences and the circumstances change, that'll change as well, because I guess at some stage international travel will come back, although I think the big days of big international conferences where people fly in and out of a location are probably 2 or 3 years away, I suspect. And I don't know if we're ever going to go back to those big international conferences. I mean, I hope we do, but that's certainly not what we're expecting in the first instance. And so we're playing it cautiously, and it's going to be small, localized, and probably a different content experience, right? Because I don't think you can just replicate what's physically and what's online. And also back to business models, if you're charging people, if we're going back to the days where we're charging people £2,000 to attend a physical event, I think their experience has to be quite different to somebody who's watching it for free online. And I think some of the content will be exclusive to the physical experience.
And resource wise, potentially you're going to have sort of 2 teams.
Yeah, this is the challenge, right? So it was quite cathartic to take millions of pounds of costs out of the P&L, and now suddenly, in a hybrid integrated world, we're basically putting those costs back in, and we're keeping the digital costs. And so it's not easy, actually. It's not straightforward. So because you can easily end up with a model where your costs are higher than what they were prior to COVID, right?
Yeah, completely. I mean, I think you've obviously got a great sponsorship base, but I mean, I think potentially for some organisations, it's going to be a real challenge.
It's going to be a real challenge. I agree, and so we're grappling with all of that at the moment, really. And there isn't, the team always look at me as like, well, what's it going to look like, and what's it going to be, and what's the answer? And I say, listen, I don't know. We're going to have to, this whole agile mindset, which was one of my big pitches to the team throughout the year, right? And so, us events people, our brains are wired for certainties, right? They're wired for deadline, certainty, exact execution, precise outcomes. And suddenly we're thrown into a world where we're in an agile experimenting kind of way, right? And so throughout last year, I kept getting questions from the team. Well, what does it look like? What's it going to be? What are going to people pay? And I kept saying to them, I don't know, but we're going to have fun with it. We're going to experiment. We're going to be tweaking it along the way. And this is going to be the same with hybrid and the integrated model. Like I don't know what it's going to look like. We're working a few options, but I keep telling the team that'll keep changing. And so we need to rewire our brains to not be the events people that live in certainties, but to people who are comfortable with living in an uncertain world.
Yeah, it's very different, isn't it? It's very different to that quite formulaic way we worked. Well, a few years ago for me, but
it's very hard, right? We come from a world where we've got exact lead times, exact production cycles, and this number of calls a week, and this number of speakers a week. And on this day, you get to book the venue. And on this day, you start selling the tickets. And all of that has gone out the window, right? And you know, you can either approach it in, oh my God, this is just completely different, I can't cope, or you can approach it on, you know what, we're going to have a bit of fun with this. Let's adopt this agile mindset, which means we do constantly iterate and change. And so back to your pricing model, you know, again, the team keep asking, what are we going to charge when we come back? I said, I don't know. We'll try and see what happens. And if we need to change, we'll keep changing, right? I think that's what we need to all get comfortable with. And I know it's not easy because that's not where we come from, right?
No, but it's exciting as well.
Exciting, yeah. It's very exciting because it means we're experimenting, and it means we can remain agile and move quickly when you have to. And if something doesn't work, it doesn't matter because we'll try something different. And you know,
were your team happy though to win the virtual event awards in January?
Unbelievably happy. Thank you, Claire. Yeah, listen, it's been you know, it's been a fun year, but obviously it's been a really difficult year, right? And so, you know, some members in our team have had COVID, some members of their family even unfortunately, you know, passed away from COVID. So it's actually been a really hard year for everyone. And, you know, the lockdown, and suddenly your business model is disrupted, and suddenly your day-to-day job is completely different, right? And you're asking people who are used to running physical events to run a digital model. And some people don't cope very well with that. And so a lot of work has gone into, we ended up with over 200 events last year. And listen, we run a variety of, you know, client-tailored events and owned events. But suddenly halfway through the year, particularly on our client-tailored event, we realized that these were selling like hotcakes. And so we ended up running a lot more events than, you know, I would probably normally be comfortable with or wanted to run. But, you know, we were in a year where we wanted to grab every opportunity we could. And so, you know, there were a couple of months, particularly October, November, where we had, I think in November, we had over 100 events. And so it's been a lot of pressure on the team. And so being able to get recognized and awarded for the hard work is obviously unbelievably satisfying. So thank you.
Good. Well, I mean, it's, as you say, I mean, it's been a tough year. Gosh, it's really been challenging, but there's innovation and exciting things which have come out of it. And
yeah,
great to hear what you've been doing, Orson. Yeah. Really inspirational. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks,
Claire. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Forward to seeing
best of luck to all the other entrants over the next few months.
Thanks.
Thanks, Claire.
Bye.
Bye.